Well, good day and welcome to the program. It is Countywide. I'm Brad Miller, and I'm happy to welcome back a couple of guests that we've talked to any number of times over a number of terrific events that happen during the course of the year. Malena Peraza is with the Alzheimer's Association, the Desert Southwest chapter.
You got that right, Brad.
Thank you. Got that right for once. And Dr. Kreuger, specialist, do I say it like that? Geriatric medicine and studies.
You did it perfectly.
Did I do it right? Oh, about that. We should stop the show now while I've got it going here. But we've chatted with you, and our guests may be familiar with you because we've talked about the good work that the two of you do with the Alzheimer's Association and with Alzheimer's patients and their families. And today, we're going to kind of focus a little bit more on the caregiver. I thought this was so terrific, Malena, when you reached out, because holiday time puts everything under a magnifying glass, and it's going to, as Dr. Kreuger mentioned off mic a moment ago, it just upends that quiet solitude kind of ideal setting for a lot of us, but especially folks with dementia patients. It can really be a frustrating time, a wonderful, terrific time, but there can be added pressures for caregivers. And so today, we're going to do that. If you are a caregiver, if you know one, if you are in a position where that is going to be a part of your life, pay attention today. We've got professionals here to talk to you about that. I want to start with this, though. Can we kind of define caregiver? I think we all have an image in our mind, especially as we're talking with dementia patients, but a spouse kind of is a caregiver from the day of the wedding. At least in our house, it certainly is. Sure. Where it's kind of back and forth, and that's going to change with one of us having dementia. And it's going to become a different dynamic, isn't it, over time?
It is. It definitely is a different dynamic. And it's not just dementia or Alzheimer's, but, as people grow older, things change in their life, challenges happen. But when it comes back to dementia, we are never really completely prepared if something happens to one of our family members, whether it's a spouse or, for myself, personal experience was taking care of my mom.
Yeah.
Best intentions, you try to do your best. Everybody is trying to really take care of that individual and realize at some point it gets really difficult to take care of that individual. So a caregiver, you don't even say that you're a caregiver. You're just doing what comes naturally because out of the love and the care and support that happens. And then when you start to realize, okay, this is a little bit more than what I'm familiar with, or I'm becoming stressed out, then you kind of realize, okay, I'm in a position where I need to figure out resources. And that's where we come into play, and we can talk with families and give them the resources and guide this as they navigate this. And it's a very difficult journey for some people.
I mean, the caregiver, I would almost say, is part of the focus of what the association does.
It is.
I mean, as much as a patient, if not more, certainly in certain programs and different kinds of offerings that the association has.
Absolutely, you're right. And we have a tendency, and I was telling Dr. Kreuger earlier, that we do have an increase of calls and visits, especially around the holiday time.
No surprise.
People are coming to visit. They see a change in grandma or mom and dad. What's going on there? Right. And we do get an increase of people wanting to talk with our support helpline manager, talk with the caregiver resources. We have a lot of people that have come in and they say, you know what? They come in very emotional. My husband or my wife or my mom was just diagnosed. I don't know where to begin. And so they talk with our helpline manager, and from there they get the resources that is specific to their needs at that time.
And Dr. Kreuger, we can see that's a great example to follow the illustration that Malena just gave us. There might be some adult children who live on the East Coast visiting family or friends, mom and dad, say, here in Arizona, and it's only an annual visit. And there can be drastic changes, can't there, with a dementia patient from one Christmas to the next?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think people are inherently born with the ability to appreciate what's going to happen.
Yeah, right.
As far as Alzheimer's, my role is, here's what we think they have, and we're pretty clear about that. Here's some resources to help you get ready for what's going to probably happen. And some of those changes can be very distressing. And it's very difficult to not take some of the things you might be seeing or hearing on a personal level.
Yeah.
And, one of my jobs as a physician, I mean, aside from referring people to resources like the Alzheimer's Association, which makes my job far, far easier, it really does, is to say, okay, your spouse or your mom or whatever, and caregivers are often family members, and
Right.
they don't necessarily have to be, but they often are by default. Here's what you can expect. I mean, this person might accuse you of taking their money, cheating on a spouse, doing all kinds of things that are distressing. And it is very, very difficult for people to not take that personally. Well, she's going to say, your mom's going to say things, but don't take it personally. Well, if it's your mom,
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Right.
But being
And-
prepared for it makes that process a little bit easier.
And moms, as you're describing, observations, allegations, perhaps, may not necessarily come out as a litany in one sitting at the dinner table. It might be over the course of a weekend that we'll see. Here again, if you don't get to visit very often, you don't live close by, is kind of the scenario I'm concentrated on. So a lot of us are in that scenario, and you can. I guess that's the key, isn't it? That's the whole ball game, is knowing when we've got, well, mom's just being a little fussy, and she's always been, to, I think something is happening here. And the work of the association and your work, doctor, that's how we find those things out. But when do we know to pick up the phone and call the association? When do we know, hey, this is more than just mom being a little cranky?
Yeah. Well, I think that is, to some extent, I think that is my job. One of the things that I found, people with Alzheimer's, it's often a disease that affects people that are older.
Right.
It's not, you're not going to see it in 30-year-olds, certainly. The people that grew up in that era often had an incredible commitment to each other.
Right.
There was that, in sickness and in health till death do us part. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad or inappropriate thing, but the challenge that I have is people of that era often find themselves committed to trying to do more than anyone can humanly do as far as the physical and psychological needs to being a caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's disease.
Right.
So for me, here's the resources. Here's what you really need to do. Here's a good time to reach out to somebody like Malena and the Alzheimer's Association. Don't feel guilty. Don't feel that it's a character flaw, because if you make yourself sick trying to take care of someone else who's sick, you're not going to do anybody any good.
Right. And that's so much easier said than done, and the two of you know that. You're experts in this field, in this game.
Absolutely.
Don't feel guilty. Don't feel shameful.
Absolutely.
Malena, how do you drive out from under that?
It is a difficult mind shift to have that penetrate and have that be actively engaged, because we have a tendency, especially again for the people that we're caring for that are loved ones, we have that guilt. But like Dr. Kreuger said, from a clinician standpoint, from the association standpoint, the more we say that to a person, the more it's collectively addressed and those words are actually brought up. Please do not feel guilty. You can only do so much. We're all humans in this together. We're not trained to do this. It's okay. And I think once they hear that continuously, and that's why we have support groups, weekly support groups, where people can share those feelings and connect together and support each other. I'm not just feeling this by myself. Somebody else is connected with me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going crazy, or I'm crying conditionally, or the guilt is there, but they all feel guilt. We all do. And that's a natural response. But ultimately, that mind shift starts to happen where they recognize they need to take that self-care, surrender the guilt, and understand they're doing it for the benefit of that loved one.
Why don't you, as we go to break, why don't you give the 800 number, if you would, so folks who might find themselves in the predicament that we've been talking about here in our opening segment know how to reach out and find some help.
Absolutely. So our number is 800-272-3900.
Okay, and we'll repeat that a number of times as we continue through the program. We do need to take a short break. Again, our guest today, Dr. Corey Kreuger, Malena Peraza, Alzheimer's Association. Dr. Kreuger here in the Cottonwood Verde Valley area, and working with geriatric patients and dementia issues certainly are a huge part of what he does, and clearly what the association does. It's countywide. We'll be back right after this. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. We welcome you back to the program. It is County-wide, and Malena Peraza, Dr. Corey Kreuger talking today. And we're talking about dementia patients, and more specifically, I think today, we're really kind of focusing on caregivers, typically a spouse, perhaps an adult child. It can be someone completely non-related to the family. We're going to cover some different scenarios as we go through our program here. Dr. Kreuger, before we open the mics, you mentioned something about the importance of the notion of respite. For the caregiver, that there needs to be, at a certain point anyway, kind of built-in windows for the caregiver to take some solace and some important time away. Talk to me about how that works. So, how that should happen.
I like your choice of words. So the concept of respite is really pretty simple. It's a block of time where the caregiver, often a spouse, it could be a child, can walk away and do whatever needs to be done to keep the household running. It could be someone who's paid to come into the house, watch the person that has Alzheimer's disease, so the person go out, do the shopping, make sure the car is repaired, just do whatever needs to be done.
The things.
Doing the things. And
Right.
the other advantage is it's also a psychological break. You know, I think those of us that deal with patients that have Alzheimer's appreciate the fact that it's not only physically demanding, it's also psychologically very, very demanding as well. And, we're not always trained to know what we're going to hear. We might be hearing things that we don't want to hear. A respite allows one to maybe, not walk away from the situation forever, but at least walk away, clear their head, get a good perspective. What am I doing? Yes, I'm doing something that's very challenging. Hopefully I'm doing it to the best of my ability. I'm thinking about all of the resources that I can take advantage of. And if not, I can at least think about, who might help me and do that. And respite is something that I generally recommend as someone's Alzheimer's disease tends to progress.
And an effective respite schedule, if you will, can be simply an afternoon.
Absolutely.
Maybe a weekend if there's the appropriate alternate caregiver or someone else responsible around. It'll depend on the situation, clearly. But that's what you're talking about. It can be as simple as just a walk in the park.
That is a great point. You just did something
Absolutely.
right now that is so beneficial to our body and our well-being. Is like Dr. Kreuger said, it's very vital to step away to take care of the things that we need to, whether it's just a walk or just to, take a break. But we have to reflect on our self-care as caregivers, and we get lost in that shuffle. And I'll bring back the holiday season only because we continue to see an influx of people that are coming in based off the natural holiday stress that we want everything to be just right. But it impacts the person. And again, speaking because of what I went through for years, I lost myself. And we don't want people to lose themselves. And it could be a simple walk. It could be just going to a movie. If somebody has a faith-based organization, reach out and get support there. Whatever that means for that individual, not to lose themselves. And respite is definitely a part of that.
But we are prideful people. And typically, as Dr. Kreuger pointed out, the generation, if you will, of folks who most typically are going to be suffering dementia are going to be folks who were married in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. It was a more traditional time. I'm just playing a little devil's advocate here.
Sure.
I don't give up. I made those vows, and I meant it, and I'm not weak. These are all things that have got to go through your heads. So what we're talking about, there are the resources, there is the respite, there's all these, but it's just so much harder for some people to do than it sounds like. That's why we're doing this radio show. That's why the association exists. That's why Dr. Kreuger studies and does what he does. But you know what I mean. You know it better than anybody.
Right, exactly.
That it sounds great, and that's right.
And that's why we are advocates on what we're suggesting and what we're really recommending for people not only to become better for themselves, but better caregivers. Because if they don't, let's face it, if we aren't taking care of ourselves, how can we possibly take care of another? But again, it comes down to the psychological mind shift of acceptance. And I also use the word surrendering. Surrender sounds like a very tricky word because it just means like, oh, well, I'm giving up to something. Well, that doesn't mean that you're surrendering and you're just foregoing everything or you have lost something. Surrendering can be a beautiful thing because it allows us that opportunity to have a mind shift for the better of that individual as a caregiver. and for the person that they're caring for. So it takes, like I said, it takes a little bit of time. It's not going to be a light switch where overnight, okay, yes, we're going back to the traditional ways of how we're caring for somebody, and taking that and just, I'm going to be the one in control. We have to surrender that at some point to realize, and family members or whoever it is can help make that shift. And that's why Dr. Kreuger does what he does in the association. We're here for that.
Dr. Kreuger, might we see kickback from the patient if the caregiver, I mean, it's going to depend on what they understand of the situation. Will suddenly coming to the spouse say is gone for just the night. And who is this person that's here, even if they're familiar with them? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's going to add to the pressure on the caregiver to think, well, he's going to know I'm not here. I've got to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's my job to remind the family member who's going to do respite of that fact. The person that you're caring for is probably going to push back. Expect it.
Yeah.
Expect it, but don't let it change your plans.
Make a plan.
Because you, as a caregiver, to be at your best, right?
Right.
You need the psychological and physical supports, right? A caregiver who is spent psychologically and physically is not a good caregiver. And it's up to me, you too sometimes, to remind them of that fact.
That's kind of keeping your eye on the ball.
The guilt is huge here.
Unbelievably. I'm
Among
not in this
family
situation, and it almost chokes me up to think about the people that are. None of whom I know, thank goodness. It's not really in our family or anywhere right now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's heartbreaking to think about that. And here's holiday time. It is supposed to be joyous. It's supposed to be all of these kinds of things, and it can just turn everything around it as a vicious disease.
If you think about, Christmas and the most wonderful time of the year,
Right.
The reality is, in some ways it is, but in a lot of ways it is the most stressful time of the year.
Sure.
And if you think about a person that has Alzheimer's, all of a sudden, there's all kinds of things going on that are opposite to the perfect Alzheimer's environment, which is supposed to be what? A predictable, calm environment.
Yeah.
Right? Think about Christmas. Think about, strangers. Maybe they're not strangers, but now to that person, they're strangers. Right?
Yeah.
Coming into the house. All
Maybe
the
into your
cooking,
home.
the decorating. And if someone requires time and attention, all of a sudden, that is really at a premium because you're getting the house ready for the celebration of Christmas.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. Tough time for someone with Alzheimer's disease. One of the toughest.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay. We need to take another break, and I think what I'd like to do when we come back, we'll give that valuable information, Malena, how people can reach out to the association and just remind them that there is help out there. There are people who understand what they're going through, and try to reiterate that because it can be very difficult to accept help, even if you know it's available, because we want to be tough. We want to do everything that we possibly can. So making that switch. We're going to do another program, and one of the things I'd really like to do is something Dr. Kreuger mentioned before we open the mics here today, and that is talking about kind of the family dynamic like siblings. We kind of think, well, we're a team, but maybe brother has different ideas than sister has for when and where and all of those. And then I want to talk about those issues of when is it time for help outside the home? When does the caregiver say, I can't do this anymore? That's got to be one of the toughest decisions anybody's ever going to make in their whole lives. So I'd like to get to that as we do another program. We'll take a short break. We'll come back. We'll wrap up. We'll give that 800 number and additional information when we come back to Countywide right after this. Guys, this is good. Okay. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. We come back to the program. Our final few moments here, we will be doing another segment. We're going to be talking about kind of a family dynamic. Very often with dementia patients, it's not just going to be the spouse or someone very close. It's going to be a family, children, in-laws. All of those kinds of different things can get painted into this big picture of what we're going to do with a loved one when dementia becomes part of their life. So we'll do that in our next segment, our next program. To wrap up this piece, though, Malena, let's give that 800 number again, and then is there a website, or what's the best way for people listening now to reach out and get your kind of help?
Absolutely. So that number is 800-272-3676. 3900. And our website is alz.org. And I highly recommend anybody that is going through this, or even if they're familiar with the association, there is so much resources and information. Resource finder for your community. You type in your zip code and it'll lead you to where you need to go.
Get some specifics.
Get some specifics.
Great.
So again, 800-272-3900 or alz.org.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Guys, I want to thank you so much. We'll continue to talk on another segment. Malena Peraza, Alzheimer's Association, Southwest Desert Chapter, Dr. Corey Kreuger, a geriatric clinician with the Verde Valley Medical Center in northern Arizona in the Verde Valley area. Guys, thanks for the work that you do. Thanks for visiting with us today, and we'll continue. I'm Brad Miller. It's Countywide, and we'll talk to you next time.